Today, in celebration of the new DLC coming out from Bethesda for Fallout 4, Automaton, I'm going to show you how to create your very own Fallout 4 loading screen. Hello and welcome back everybody. Now, I am a very big fan of the entire Fallout franchise. I thought all of them were really good, and except for maybe one that kind of fell short in my opinion. But nevertheless, once we hit Fallout 3 and 4, the entire scene changed for it. And I really do like Fallout 4. I love it, in fact. There are a few flaws, yes, but I do love the game. One of the things that I do enjoy is the loading screens that we'll find during the game. And what I wanted to do was recreate that Fallout 4 loading screen with the level of the character, some of the data display, the text, the little animated radar blip sort of thing in the corner, and of course the rotating 3D object that we'll see in the loading screen. And I want to show you how to make your very own Fallout 4 style loading screen. And what we're going to start off here with is the background image, which I have in front of me right now. And if you follow the link down below in the description, you'll find a way to download this image to follow along if you like. And once we have this background image laid out for us, we want to set up a few things first. One being the rulers and the guidelines. So we're going to do that first by going to the View menu and scroll down till you see rulers here. Make sure that's checked, turn that on. And then we want the guidelines. So we're going to go back to the View menu and down to the New Guide Layout. Now I've already gotten this preset here, and it may look a little bit different when you open it up because the new guide layout will hold on to any of the last settings that you have used. So in order to fix this, what you want to do first is make sure that you click the check mark for clear existing guides at the bottom of that window. Then once you have that, set up the numbers as I have here. Under columns, you're going to check that, make sure the number is 15. The width and gutter will be blank. For rows, the number will be 9, the height and gutter will be blank, and uncheck margin if it is checked, and the same with center columns. Make sure that it's unchecked. Once you have that set up, click OK, and we're going to draw our lines here. We're going to do that with the line tool. So over on the left side, under the shape tools, click and hold down to have the entire menu here, and select line tool. And once we've got the line tool, make sure it is set up for shape, blank fill. For the stroke, click on the color swatch there. I'm going to choose white, 3-point, and all the way across over here, the weight will be 2 pixels. Now we will be using this as a shape because as you create each new line, it'll create a new layer, and you don't have to worry about creating your own blank layer and drawing on top of it. And plus, creating as a shape will help that shape snap to the guidelines. And we're just going to crisscross all throughout the image except for the absolute outer bounds of it. So just make sure you go and click anywhere along that guideline, and you see if you drag your mouse back and forth a little bit, it will snap to the straight line, and then just stretch it across your image, let it snap into place, and release the mouse. And you're going to do that all the way across the top and then all the way across the sides. And I will just speed up the video here a little bit so we can get through this monotonous part. Alright, now that we have the grid lines laid out for us here, what we want to do is rasterize this layer. So with the top layer that you've created selected, scroll down to the first line layer. Over here at shape 1, hold down your shift key and click that layer, and it'll select all of your shapes. Right click and rasterize layers. And then right click again and select merge layers. And now we've got the basic grid work laid out. While still keeping the guides here open, we want to zoom into one of the squares. I'm going to choose one from around the top left side. It doesn't matter which one you choose, but zoom in nice and close. And we're going to start with the move tool here because we want to drag a couple more guidelines in. And we're going to start with the top. So click along the ruler's bar and drag a guideline down to about the middle of this little square area here. Release the mouse and then do it again from the left side. Bring it around to about the middle and release the mouse. I'm going to go back to our line tool and now start a line from the top center of that square, right about there, and drag it to the bottom end, and then start with the left to the right side, following these two new guidelines you have created, starting with that little crosshair. Now we're going to go back to the shape tools and we're going to select the ellipse tool. Make sure this is also set as shape, blank fill, and a white stroke with a 3-point size. And now we're going to hover the mouse over the center of these crosshairs, click and drag outwards while pressing the Shift and Alt key so that your circle will grow from the center, but we don't want to bring it all the way out. On the Fallout 4 loading screen, they just go about halfway, so we'll eyeball it to around there and release the mouse. Once we have our crosshair created here, we don't need these two extra guides, so we're going to get those out of the way by clicking with your move tool along the blue line and dragging it straight off the screen. And same thing for this one here. And now we want to combine these three shapes into one while still having it retain the qualities of a shape to be able to snap along the guidelines. So we're going to hold down the Shift key and click on Shape 23 now. Right click and select Convert to Smart Object. And now we have our crosshairs as a single layer object. And we're going to move that until it snaps into place along the grid line and the square we want to have it set in. So starting from the top left corner, we're going to go with 4 spaces across. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 3 down. 1, 2, 3. And because it's a smart object containing shapes, it will snap to the guidelines. Now we're going to make a copy of this by pressing Ctrl J. And now we're going to move that copy to the left and down by 1. Hold down your Control key and click Ellipse 1. Right click and select Convert to Smart Object. Press Ctrl J to make a copy of those and go to the Edit menu. Scroll down to Transform and we're going to flip horizontal. And then drag that shape, that smart object rather, we're going to drag that down to there. Now hold down the Control key again and click the Ellipse 1 copy. Right click and Convert to Smart Object. Press Ctrl J to make a copy of those. Back to the Edit menu. And we're going to flip this horizontal. And now drag this all the way across the screen until it looks symmetrical here. We're going to drop it right in there. And now that we've gotten that entire setup, the crosshairs and the grid lines, we're going to hold down the Shift key and click Shape number 22. Right click, and now we're going to rasterize these 3 layers. And right click again to merge the layers. And now we no longer need our guidelines here, so go to the View menu, scroll down and select Clear Canvas Guides. Now we have the next step of our basic grid line work here, but we need to make a couple of small changes in this to make it fit a lot better with the color theme of our background. So we're going to add a layer style, and we're going to choose Color Overlay. Now for our color overlay, blend mode will be normal. Click on the color swatch, and for the value of this color, you're going to enter 535400 and click OK. Leaving the opacity as 100% here, click OK again. And the opacity for the layer itself, I'm going to bring down to 10%. Go to the filter menu, and under Distort, select Pinch. And for the amount, we're going to type in -20%. And that will give the grid work that slight bulge that we see in Fallout 4 to give it that appearance of a sort of CRT screen. Now that we have that done, we're going to add a layer mask to this layer. And with our foreground color set to black, I'm going to choose a large soft brush at about 500 pixels here. We're just going to lightly brush away some of the grid lines and some of the work around the edges. Make sure that the opacity of this brush is set to 50%, and just do a few clicks, tap, and brush away some of the lines that reach the absolute edge. You don't have to be exact and purely methodical about this, but just get a few lines out of the way. If you feel like you want to grow your grid a little bit and have it fill out the screen a little bit more, what you could do is press Control T to open up the free transform tool, zoom out a little bit to get a better view, and click any one of the corner handles, hold down the Shift and the Alt key, and just drag it outwards until your grid lines fill out the scene a little bit more. Click the check mark once you're satisfied, and we've gotten our background image ready. And now on to the text and data display that we're going to find on our loading screen here. We want to select the text, the type tool, and let's get rid of the rulers after we set one more thing here. We need one guideline. Drag this out from the left side and bring that to about 150 pixels, because all of the text and the data we want to enter, we need to snap along that guideline and keep a nice straight line for us, and that will help us out a great deal. But we don't need to keep the rulers anymore, so let's get rid of those. And with our type tool, the font is going to be Bell Gothic Standard Bold. The point will be 30, and for the color, click on that color swatch, and as a value for this color here, you're going to enter 24FF1D, for that bright green that Fallout is really known for. Click OK, and now we get to type in our text here. Now it starts off with showing the level of the character, which I'm going to just keep it simple and not be too bold. I'm just going to say level 1. Click the check mark once that is completed, and just move it until it snaps along the line. Now we can leave it anywhere we like. We'll adjust it later as necessary. So I'm just going to leave it over here for now. And we want to create the actual display of the player's level and progression underneath. So to do this, we're going to go to the Shape Tools, and we're going to select the Rectangle tool. with shape as our tool mode. The fill will be blank. The stroke, now that we have a new foreground color, you'll find it right here. So click that green. It's going to be 3-point. And we could start the outline of that. I'm just going to zoom in here. We could start the outline of that level gauge right along the guideline here. And you're going to keep it fairly thin and just bring it out to, we're going to go with about 500 pixels. Once you have the right size that you want, release the mouse, and we have the nice hollowed outline of the rectangle here. And now we want to fill up this gauge. We'll just say to about halfway, but what we want is now a solid rectangle, so we're going to select pixels. And what we need here is a new layer. So click on the symbol for the new layer. And I need to zoom in a lot closer because you want to start this rectangle within the color of our previous one. And drag that out, let's say to about there. Release the mouse, and we have our level gauge. But that needs to be a single layer. So what we're going to do is select both of them here, the layer one and the rectangle one. Right click that and merge layers. The next thing we're going to create here is the large body of text that you'll find on the loading screens, describing in some essence whatever you're going to find rotating on the loading screen. Now you can type in whatever you like based on what 3D object you've decided to use for this image, and I'll get into the object I'm using in a little bit. I already have something pre-written here. So in order to get that in, and what you might want to do if you also pre-write what you want to fill out, you can get your type tool set. Everything is still the same here, color, point size, and font. And you click and drag out a bounding box. And your text will go into this box and not exceed the size of the box until you change the dimensions of it yourself if you feel you need to later. So I'll drag it out to about this size here, release the mouse, and then I will right click within the box and select paste. And I just want to adjust the box until it's the right size for me, where I don't have any of the words hyphenated. And that seems about right. And once that is done, I'll click the check mark. And we want our bounding box now around this text. So we're going to go back to the rectangle tool and pick shape. Anywhere along the guideline, I'm going to click and drag the bounding box a little bit larger than the text itself. So we're going to have to move that text out just a little bit. Once that's in place, I'm going to select the text here. And with the move tool, just using my arrow keys, tapping to the right a few times until I get the text in the box. I'm going to reselect the top layer here and go back to our type tool. That's the last bit of text we want to enter is right above this bounding box, and it's going to be that fallout for information of the VDSD catalog. So let me start that here. VDSG catalog, capital N, small o, dot, and whatever 4 numbers you choose. 8273. Click the check mark to set that in, and I'm going to open up the character panel here because this is not in bold. So open up the character panel and deselect this bold T over here to bring that back to normal, and get the move tool to just get it in place up against the guideline. And we want to select three different layers here. So with the VDSG catalog layer selected, hold down your control key and click on rectangle 1 directly below, and then the larger body of text, and using your arrow keys, move them upwards until they fit in a place that you're comfortable with, and I'll go with right about there. Let's zoom in a little bit more, because the very last thing that we need to do with this text and data display is add a drop shadow. Now, it might be hard to see sometimes when you're playing the game and you're paying attention to other things, but if you look at any still frames of a loading screen, this data and text display has a very simple and very sharp black drop shadow. So we're just going to add it to the VDSG catalog layer by opening up the layer styles here and choosing drop shadow. Now this has already been preset here. Blend mode is normal, color is black, opacity at 100%. The angle I have at 131 degrees. The distance is 3 pixels. Spread and size are 0. Everything else leave alone, and you'll see a very sharp, thin black line around the bottom of the letters and numbers, and that is its drop shadow. Very simple but effective. Fallout 4 loading screens have used it, so I wanted to add them in. Click OK, and then right-click the layer and select Copy Layer Style. Then select Rectangle 1, holding down your Control key. Select the 3 layers below it. Larger body of text, Layer 1, Level 1. Right-click and select Paste Layer Style. And now that drop shadow has been applied to everything here. Let's zoom back out. And now I can get rid of this guideline. Just click your mouse on it and drag it right off the screen. I do see that everything there is a little bit high, so I'm going to lower those down. Holding down my control key, I'm also going to select the top layer. Have them all selected, got my move tool. And now if I want to move them down, but a little bit further than 1 pixel at a time, I'm going to hold down the shift key as I press the down arrow, and that will move it 10 pixels every time that I press the down arrow. And I'll bring it to about there. And I think that looks pretty good. So the next step that we're going to go to is creating the actual animation of the symbol you'll find on the bottom right of the screen. That sort of pseudo radar blip that Fallout 4 has. But before I get into that animation, I want to take all of the layers, except for the background, and I want to turn those into a smart object. It'll reduce the clutter, and I can always go back into the smart object later to adjust anything that I've worked on previously. If I need to make any changes, just open up the smart object, change my text, change my level, and everything would be just fine there. So I'm going to select everything here, from the top layer to the grid work. Right click and select Convert to Smart Object. Now we could go for the blip animation, and we need to open up a new file here. So we're going to select New. Make sure the width is 200 pixels, the height 150 pixels, and click OK. And we want to do a couple of things for this file here to make it easier to see what we're working with. First thing we need to do is fill this with black. And then we need to open up the rulers here so we could drag out 2 guidelines to the center of this file. It should snap right into the center. Once they are snapped into place here, we can get rid of the rulers. We're going to create a new layer and then go to the Paths panel, because we're going to create that shape with the shape tools as paths. So first thing I would get is the ellipse tool, and changing the tool type up here from shape to path. Make sure everything else is set up correctly. Opening up this little drop-down menu here, we want Combine Shapes. And then hover your mouse over the center of this file. Click and drag outwards while holding down the Shift and Alt key. And we're going to create this first circle here at 100 pixels. Next tool we need is the rounded rectangle tool. Make sure it's set to path and the radius is 40 pixels. And we're going to create the 3 bars that go across the symbol here. And you can start from the absolute edges of the image here, or just a little bit inwards, which I will. And you're just going to want to eyeball this to a little bit above this guideline. We're going to click and drag our rounded rectangle until it's symmetrical here above and below the guideline and with about equal distance from the edges of the image. Once you have that, release the mouse, and now we need to create 2 more of a shorter length, so about half this distance and a little bit below. I'm going to click and drag another rounded rectangle to about the same and release the mouse. Now to make a duplicate of this, I'm going to hold down the Control and Alt key until I see that little plus symbol right next to the arrow as I'm on one of the square dots here, and I can click and drag upwards a duplicate, holding down the Shift key to keep it in line, and it will only move vertically for me until it mirrors the bottom one. And then I release the mouse. Going up above to this symbol here, I'm going to click that and open up the drop-down menu, select Merge Shape Components. So now I have one solid shape. I go back to the tools here and select the Ellipse tool. With my mouse over the center of the image, click and drag outwards, holding the Shift and Alt key, and grow that circle until it's 80 pixels. Release the mouse, go back to this drop-down menu, and select Subtract from Shape. Now we have a hole. If you look on the path panel, we have a hole punched out of the initial shape, but we need to combine everything. So go back to there and select Merge Shape Components. Since green is still now our foreground color, go to the Paths panel and along the bottom at the very left of these symbols, click this one here, and that will fill your path with the foreground color. And anywhere outside of the path layer here, click anywhere outside of that because it's no longer necessary to keep the path itself open. Click outside of that to deselect. Let's go to the Layers panel and zoom in some. Now we need to create the little dot in the center and the 2 rings that grow out from that center. We're going to work with a new layer here, so create a new layer, and with the Ellipse tool selected, we're just going to make this one simple and choose pixels. From the center, click, drag outwards, holding Shift and Alt until that center dot is 8 pixels. And now with the Ellipse tool, we're going to once again use this, selecting Shape this time. Everything will remain the same, the color green, the 3-point, and because this will create a new layer once the shape is created, I don't need to create my very own blank. I'm going to click, drag, holding Shift and Alt, and grow that circle until it's large enough to be inside the original circle. And press Ctrl J to make a copy of that. Let's rename the Ellipse 1 copy to Ellipse 2. Makes it a little bit easier when it comes to recognizing layers in the animation, in my opinion. And we need to create these 2 ellipses as smart objects. So right click on the layer, convert to smart object, select the ellipse 1, right click, and convert to smart object. Need to zoom back out a little bit, and now we're going to go to the Windows menu above and select Timeline. Make sure that the button in the center says Create Video Timeline. You know, these two choices here to create the video timeline or create frame animation. We're going to be using Create Video Timeline. So select that, and now we have the beginning of our animation. Now, the actual animation is only going to be 2 seconds long, but it's going to be looped into a 30-second long animation. So let's drag these timelines down to 2 seconds for each of the layers. And we could use these down here to zoom in a little bit, see a little bit more of what we're working with. And for the circles themselves, ellipse 1 and ellipse 2, we need to shorten their animation to 1 second long each. So make sure to click and drag those and shrink those down to 1 second each. Move your player head, move that to the 15th frame, which would be half a second. Now my animation is set for 30 frames a second. If you need to change yours, click this little symbol here and set the timeline frame rate to 30 pixels. Once the playhead is at the 15th frame, you're going to grab ellipse 1 and drag that out until it snaps to place at the playhead. Starting with ellipse 2, we're going to bring this to the 1 second mark. Making sure ellipse 2 is selected. I'm going to open up the layer here, and I'm going to click on transform because we are going to be working backwards. Once I click this little symbol next to the word transform, it will give me a keyframe. This tells Photoshop that at this very moment, that circle is here within the larger circle, and we can't see it. But what I'm going to do is now drag the playhead back to the first frame and press Ctrl T to open up the free transform tool. Holding down my Shift and Alt key, I'm going to take that circle and shrink it down until it has disappeared within that center dot. Once I click the check mark, you see that there is a new keyframe added. This is the altered state. So we did it backwards. From the altered state, I will drag the playhead up, and you see as that circle grows to the 1 second mark, and then we'll wait until it loops back. So we're just going to do the same thing with ellipse 1. I'm going to go to the very end of it. Let me close that. Scroll down a little bit. I'm going to open up ellipse 1 and click on transform to open up that keyframe at the very end. And then I'm going to drag it back to the beginning of the ellipse 1 animation at the 15th frame and press Ctrl T to do the same thing I did before. Hold down the Shift and Alt key and drag that circle down until it disappears into the dot in the middle. And now I've got the next keyframe, which will signify for me the end of this animation. I'm going to go back to frame number 1 and press play to see how the animation works here. And now I have my 2 second animation, which is for the preview looped. I now need to actually loop it myself. So let me go back to frame number 1. And what I need to do is take the entire set of shapes and animations and turn them into a smart object here. So I'm going to select the top, Shift, click bottom, right click, and go to Convert to Smart Object. And it still remains the same. I still have my 2-second animation here. And let me zoom out a little bit. Because in order to get our 30-second frame, we need to make a copy of this ellipse 2 now. So press Ctrl J. Now I've got a new layer. It doesn't matter which one is on top or bottom right now. I'm going to click and drag the bottom layer, ellipse 2, right on top of ellipse 2 copy, and at the end of it, creating for myself a video group now. Now all I need to do is press Ctrl J to make enough copies of this layer to total 30 seconds. Because they're 2 seconds each, I would need 15. I've already got 2, so I need to press Ctrl J 13 times. Once I've gotten my entire set laid out for me here, I'm going to click on the video group, right click, and turn that into a smart object. And I now have a 30-second loop of the radar blip, which I'm going to bring into my original image now. So I'm going to click and drag the layer itself over to what I'm working with and drop it in there. I need to click on Create Video Timeline for this image now. And once that's set up, you'll see that the video group is 30 seconds long. All I need to do now is take this and drag it out to 30 seconds as well. And let's just move this into place. Oh, wrong one. I'm going to grab the video group. I'm going to move that to the bottom right corner. Press Ctrl T in order to resize it. We need to make it much, much smaller. But once we get it into place, confirm, and let's check out this animation so far. It's very small and very simple, but it does work. And now we need to get into the larger effect. We need to bring in the 3D object that we're going to rotate in our loading screen here. The 3D image that I've decided to use was something that I created for a personal project of mine back in late 2014. It's pretty large and complex, but I think it fits really well with the theme I was trying to go with here, being an object from the Mechanist, the guy who's being reintroduced in the new DLC coming out. I just kind of want to add a little bit of my own to the lore here. So first thing I want to do, I don't need this anymore, so I can close that, and I'm not saving it. And I'm going to go into Bridge, where I know I have the file here. And this is the spider thing that I'm going to be throwing in there. Now you can add your own 3D objects, create them from Photoshop 3D or any outside program and bring them in. This one here took me an incredibly long amount of time. There are about 170 different individual pieces to this, so it really slows the system down, and I'm going to try to compensate for that during the video here and keep things at a decent pace. Once I have this file open, I can click the layer itself and drag that into my background image here. And I want it underneath the grid work, and I want it underneath the text and data display. So I'm going to just drag that down here. Scroll upwards, and I'm also going to make the animation for this layer 30 seconds long. And give myself as much room as possible here. Up at the top right of the screen, I'm going to open up that drop-down window and select 3D. And I have it laid out specifically the way that I use it here. Might be different for you. but it gives all the tools necessary for what we're going to do here. Now, like I said, I'm going to be using my object here, which I'm not going to be offering a link to because one, it is very large and complex and complicated. It slowed down my system greatly, and I can't guarantee exactly how it will affect anybody else's system. I don't want to cause a crash or anything. So you can use some very simple shape tools from the 3D just to test out and practice on your own. Or like I said, if you have anything else that you create 3D objects with, like Blender, or hell, that's the only one I know off the top of my head right now. But you bring these things in, you can create your own magazine, which is very simple shape to work with. Um, Once you have brought this in and you have it set up in the list of layers that you need it as, above the background and below the grid and below the data and text display. Once it's there, you want to move the object around to get it in its initial position where the animation is going to start from. So what you would need to do is click on Current View in the 3D panel. With the Move tool selected, pick and choose any one of these individual tools here to move your object into the right place. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I'm going to start them off somewhere on the left side of the screen, sorry, rather the right side of the screen. And I just may speed up this video a little bit until I get him in the right spot. Actually, I think that one works for me. And what I'm going to do is in the Properties panel, it's now a custom view number 3 for me, and I'm just going to save that so I can come back to that once I'm done with the animation. Um, Saved as custom view 3. And now we're going to get very simple here. Under the same drop-down window, we're going to select Top. I'm going to grab this tool here, pan the 3D camera, in order to move the spider into the position I'm going to start working with him in, and zoom in to the image itself to get it as large as possible. And I also need the timeline open. So from the Windows panel, I'm going to open up my timeline. And let's keep moving this spider out of the way until I get him where I'm comfortable. A couple of things we need to do to prepare for animating the 3D object. It's going to spin 360 degrees over the course of 30 seconds. But we're going to divide that into 3 sections, 10 seconds each, 120 degrees each. In the timeline panel, click on this symbol here to open up layer 1, which will be whatever the 3D object is you're using. Scroll down until you see 3D meshes. Click to open that up, and making sure that the actual 3D object is selected and the mesh within the 3D panel, which would be for me my steampunk spider. We're going to click this symbol next to my steampunk spider over here to get our first keyframe. And we're going to move this tab over to 10 seconds. Now, in order to use this technique, you need to make sure that OpenGL is enabled for your system here in Photoshop. To make sure of this, click on the Edit menu, go down to Preferences and Performance. And you'll see somewhere along this panel the graphics processor setting. You need to have it checked off to show that it's positive. You have your graphics processor being used, and then under Advanced Settings, make sure that you have checkmarked over here, Use OpenGL. And when those are enabled, you'll be able to have your different axes enabled to be manipulated over here on the object itself. So we have our first keyframe at the first frame here with no movement. We've moved the slider over to 10 seconds, and now we're going to put our mouse over the y-axis, which is what we're going to use to spin this. And if you find that it's a little bit too small, what you can do is hover your mouse over the center, if you can see here, a little white box, and you can hold down your shift key, click and drag upwards to increase the size, just so that it's a little bit easier to work with. Every time you release the mouse, at least for me, it reselects the light system, which I don't like, but I'll go back to the steampunk spider and do this again until it's a little finicky at times. I keep doing this until I've gotten this large enough that it's easier for me to work with. And you could always do the opposite, hold down the shift key and click drag down to make it smaller once you're done. But once we're here, and this is a decent enough size for me, I'm going to hover my mouse over this little curvature on the y-axis until it shows in that little box, rotate around y-axis. I'm going to left click, and now I will drag in a clockwise direction until I come to 120 degrees. Now it is very, like I said, finicky, and sometimes you might go over a little bit or under, and it's okay if you're off by 1/10 of a degree. Like I'm going to stick with 120.1 degrees here. That's fine by me. And I will release the mouse. Now whether or not Photoshop updates the image clearly, it depends on the system. I think that has a lot to do with the spider itself and how much memory I'm using in Photoshop. But it shows that it has been changed down here in the timeline. I've got my new keyframe. So I'm going from straight on to slowly rotating 120.1 degrees to here. And now I'm going to drag the playhead over to 20 seconds. And now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to grab the y-axis and in a clockwise direction, click and drag it around until it shows me 120 degrees. And I've released the mouse. I've got my new keyframe. And I'm going to scroll over and bring the playhead all the way to the end of the animation. And now do it once more, dragging to 120 degrees, which will bring it back to its theoretical original position. And I'm going to drop it at 119.7, which is just about close enough to 120 for me. Click on this here to go back to frame 1. And I'm going to make a little bit of room and get my image to fill the screen so I can see everything here at once. Now I want to get the spider back to the position I liked before, the one that I wanted him to be animated from. So I'm going to click on Custom View 3 here and watch him get thrown back into place. And now I can press play and see how the animation looks. So it should be under the course of 30 seconds, rotating completely around. Let's see how it works. And it runs extra slow because it is rendering each frame to get through this 30-second animation. It's trying to keep up with the shadows, the negative space, and some of the lighting effects I have. So it will take a little time to catch up, and I will just fast forward through this process with you so you don't have to sit through the entire time with me here. And there we have the very basic rotation of our 3D object here. Um, I think it looked pretty good. I might have moved it over a little bit to the right, but it's good enough for the purposes of what I wanted to show you here. But this is basically how you would construct for yourself your very own Fallout 4 loading screen. Now, once you are completed, you're going to want to render your video. And we run into at least one issue here where you have to consider time. You can, once you open up the render ability here, click this symbol and select render video. And once this window is open, you'll have to select a name for your project, give it a folder, and any of the pertinent information that you need to fill in and select in order to get the right type of animation that you want. If you want to send it to YouTube or keep it as a personal project, what size do you want it as? And when it comes to render options, this is when you're concerning yourself with the 3D object itself. Under 3D quality, if you have OpenGL enabled, using this will give you a render that's a lot faster, but the quality won't be as great. Like I said, if you're wanting to use this as a personal project and you just want to sort of test the way it looks as it goes through, you would want to choose this. And then the two beneath it, they are Race Trade Draft and Final, each one getting a little bit better. The draft is, as it's explained, it's just the draft like quality, and final, you would get to choose exactly how much detail and how good you want this to be. And the higher of the quality threshold you choose, the longer you're going to wait for the render. Now, I can tell you from when I first ran this through my original project, it ran for a number of hours, and I just had to sort of pull back a little bit. I pushed myself a little bit too far here. My first 3D project, the first time I played in Photoshop 3D, it was a very simple image, did not look very great at all, but it was something I just wanted to get done. The second one I did was a lot better. I learned a few things, and I think the image was pretty good, but it was not animated. Because when you think about animation, you're not just rendering one image. Every time your 3D object rotates into another frame, it's got to render that image as well. So taking this 3D spider and running it through ray traced final at a very high quality, I couldn't even begin to imagine how long this would take me, and I'm not going to experiment with that. This is why I suggest you might want to use something more basic for your loadout screen. Unless you have a completely kick-ass system, then I say go ahead and make something as complex as you want. But you might want to stick with the interactive OpenGL for something pretty basic. With the ray traced draft, you don't get to choose the threshold quality, and you'll still be running a pretty long render time, but not as long as the ray traced final. And once you've decided how you're going to run this, you would click on render. I'm not going to do that right now, and eventually have for yourself your own animated Fallout 4 loading screen. Well, thanks for spending the time with me to go through this tutorial here. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up. And if you really, really liked it, give me a little click on the subscribe button. And check down in the description below. If you feel like you want to buy my image, this steampunk spider thing that I made, follow that link to my DeviantArt page where I do happen to have it for sale. Show me a little love there, that'd be great. If not, I'm okay with it too. But I hope you had a good time, and I look forward to seeing any and all of you again when I come up with some new work here, and I'm going to throw out as much as I can. So until next time, I'll see you next time.